Have you ever wondered if everyone around you is truly alive inside? Look closely at the faces in the crowd, the strangers you pass every day, and ask yourself, are they all conscious beings? Or are some merely wearing the mask of humanity? In the late 19th century, a visionary mystic named Helena Blavatsky dared to suggest an unsettling possibility that some people, though human in appearance, lack a soul. She called them human shells, living bodies without the divine spark that gives life its depth and meaning. But Blavatsky was not alone. Long before her, the ancient Gnostics warned of a similar truth. And in modern times, controversial voices like David Icke have echoed the same haunting message that among us walk beings devoid of spirit serving forces we cannot see. In this video, we will unravel the mystery of these soulless entities, who they are, how to recognize them, and most importantly, how to avoid becoming one. This is not just history. It is a call to awaken. Let's dive in. Born in 1831 in what was then the Russian Empire, Blavatsky was not an ordinary thinker. From a young age, she demonstrated an insatiable hunger for hidden knowledge, the kind not found in libraries, but whispered in the halls of temples and transmitted in secret by initiates. Over the course of her life, she would travel to Egypt, India, Tibet, and across Europe, studying with mystics, sages, and spiritual masters from diverse traditions. Eventually, she would co-found the Theosophical Society in 1875, a movement dedicated to uniting Eastern and Western, exploring the hidden laws of nature and investigating the latent powers within humanity. A magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888, is a sprawling work that blends ancient philosophy, comparative religion, and occult science. Within its dense, symbolic language lies one of her most provocative claims that not all human beings are equally animated by the higher principles of consciousness. In her view, a human is not simply a physical organism, but a composite of 7 principles, layers of existence that range from the purely material to the purely spiritual. The first 3 of these principles pertain to our physical and vital existence. The physical body, the astral body, a subtle double of the physical form, and prana or life energy. The middle principles, the lower mind, manners in its unawakened form, and karma desire nature, govern our thoughts, emotions, and instincts. But the 2 highest principles, the higher mind, awakened manners united with buddhi, spiritual intuition, and atma, pure spirit, are what connect us to the divine. They are the seat of true self-awareness, moral insight, and the ability to transcend our lower nature. Blavatsky's crucial point was this: these higher principles are not automatically active in every person. The human soul, in her terminology, is the bridge between the animalistic nature and the divine spark, but that bridge can remain undeveloped, or it can be damaged, even severed. A person may live their entire life without ever activating their higher mind and spiritual intuition. Worse still, a person who once had a living connection to their soul could, through extreme materialism, moral corruption, or spiritual neglect, lose it entirely. When this happens, the physical organism continues to function. The person can still speak, work, and even mimic emotions. But inwardly, there is no true subjectivity, no reflective awareness, no sense of the sacred. The higher self has withdrawn, leaving behind only what Blavatsky called a shell, a human body animated solely by the lower principles, moving through life like a sophisticated biological automaton. In Isis Unveiled, one of her earlier works, Blavatsky wrote ominously, "Our current cycle is preeminently one of such deaths of the soul. we rub shoulders with soulless men and women at every step of life. For her, this was not a poetic exaggeration, but an observable truth of the age. She believed that in times of spiritual decline, these human shells became more common. So what are these soulless like? In practice, according to Blavatsky, they are often indistinguishable from ordinary people, at least outwardly. They may be charming, competent, even successful in worldly terms, but there is a certain hollowness to them. They have no genuine inner life, no silent dialogue with themselves about meaning or morality. They may imitate compassion, but it is strategic rather than heartfelt. They may express opinions, but those opinions are borrowed wholesale from the environment, television, gossip, authority figures, rather than born of personal reflection. Some, she suggested, might even become the unwitting hosts for other intelligences, psychic parasites, as she described them, especially if their empty state makes them vulnerable. In ancient Gnostic language, these might be called archons, entities that thrive on manipulation and control, feeding on the chaos and ignorance of humankind. To understand the metaphor she often used, imagine the human body as a vessel. At birth, it has the potential to be filled with a luminous essence, the divine spark. This spark can be nurtured through self-knowledge, moral discipline, and spiritual practice, or it can be neglected until it flickers and dies. When the spark is gone, the vessel remains, but now it is a shell, vulnerable to being filled with whatever influence or program happens to dominate in its environment. Poor Blavatsky. This was not a moral condemnation. She did not portray the soulless as villains in a simple sense, but as tragic cases, beings who had, for whatever reason, failed to climb the evolutionary ladder toward higher consciousness. In her cosmology, evolution was not only physical, but spiritual. Some souls advanced, others lagged behind, and some became stuck altogether. The soulless were not evil by necessity. Rather, they were incomplete, and yet, because they lacked the inner compass of a living soul, they were easily manipulated, easily corrupted, and often became instruments, willingly or not, of forces opposed to human spiritual progress. Her vision was stark, but she insisted it was part of the great cosmic process. Not every human in every era would reach spiritual maturity. Some would remain at the threshold, their higher principles dormant. Others would lose them altogether. And those of us who valued consciousness had a responsibility to cultivate and protect our own soul, lest we too become one of the living shells. This is the lens through which Blavatsky looked at the modern world of her time. And she warned, the situation would only intensify in future ages. Her words have a chilling relevance today. Whether we take them literally or metaphorically, they force us to confront the question, what makes a human truly human? Is it our DNA, our intelligence, our capacity for speech? Or is it something invisible, immeasurable, and yet unmistakable when present? The light of the soul? Long before Helena Blavatsky spoke of human shells, another group of mystics had already hinted at the same disturbing truth. Nearly 2,000 years ago, in the early centuries of the Common Era, the Gnostics, mystics, philosophers, and spiritual rebels emerged as a radical undercurrent in the ancient world. They were not a single sect, but a loose network of spiritual movements unified by one audacious conviction: that the material world we inhabit is not the highest reality, but a prison. In Gnostic cosmology, the world was created not by the ultimate, ineffable God, but by a lesser deity, a being they called the demiurge. This demiurge, often associated with the jealous and vengeful God of the Old Testament, was seen not as evil in the cartoonish sense, but as ignorant, an artisan god who shaped matter without understanding the higher transcendent realms. And serving this demiurge were archons, cosmic jailers whose task was to keep human beings trapped in the illusion of material existence. The Gnostics taught that within some humans burned a divine spark, a fragment of the higher God's essence. But, and here is the chilling echo of Blavatsky's doctrine, not all humans possessed it. In their teachings, humanity was divided into three distinct types. The first group was the hylic, from the Greek hylo, meaning matter. These were individuals entirely bound to the physical world. Their desires, fears, and ambitions never rose above the material plane. Survival, pleasure, power, possessions. They lived and died without ever suspecting there was anything beyond. Hylics had no awareness of a higher reality, and crucially, no capacity to awaken to it. In the language of Blavatsky, these were the soulless, human in form, but without the divine spark. The second group was the psychics. They possessed an ordinary soul and could, through effort and divine assistance, awaken to higher truths. But they were also vulnerable to being pulled back into the orbit of the material. The psychics were the battleground, the ones who could go either way. And finally, the pneumatics, those rare individuals who were fully conscious of their divine origin. They had gnosis, which in Greek means knowledge, but not intellectual knowledge. This was experiential, transformative knowledge of the divine within and beyond. For the pneumatic, the material world was a veil, and they had learned how to pierce it. The Gnostics' goal was not to improve the prison, but to escape it entirely. For them, life was a rescue mission to awaken the dormant sparks within those who could be awakened, and to slip past the archons into the true eternal realm. This division of humanity was not meant as a justification for arrogance. Rather, it was a sober recognition of the spiritual landscape. Just as not all seeds germinate, not all human beings flower into full spiritual consciousness. Many live and die in the hylic state, never questioning the reality presented to them, never feeling the inner call to awaken. One striking passage from the Gospel of Philip, a text unearthed in 1945 at Nag Hammadi in Egypt, reads, "There are many who are in this world, but they are not of it." This simple statement carries an immense weight. It suggests that while all of us share the same external environment, not all of us share the same inner origin or destiny. For some, this world is the only home they will ever know. For others, it is a foreign land they are destined to transcend. When we read these ancient words through the lens of Blavatsky's teaching, the parallels are striking. The Gnostic hylic is Blavatsky's human shell, present in body, absent in spirit. The psychic is the undeveloped soul, capable of connection but not yet realized. And the pneumatic is the fully awakened being, united with their higher principles. The Gnostics also warned that the archons, whether we understand them as literal entities, metaphors for oppressive systems, or something in between, delight in keeping humanity in the hylic state. They weave illusions, stir up distractions, and ensnare minds in petty conflicts so that the divine spark never ignites. The archon's greatest victory is not in harming the body, but in ensuring the soul never realizes it is more than a body. This worldview was deeply threatening to the orthodox religious authorities of the time. To tell people that the God they worshipped was not the highest God, and that many humans were spiritually empty vessels, was heresy of the most dangerous kind. The Gnostics were persecuted, their texts destroyed, their communities scattered. For centuries, their wisdom was almost lost until a buried library of their writings was rediscovered in the Egyptian desert. Today, with the benefit of that discovery, we can see that their ideas were not isolated curiosities, but part of a recurring human insight. That consciousness is not evenly distributed, that some people live with an inner fire and others without it, and that this difference is not always visible on the surface. If we strip away the mythological framework, the core message remains. There are forces, whether cosmic, institutional, or psychological, that keep people asleep. And there are those rare individuals who see through the illusion. Between them lies the great gulf that mystics like the Gnostics and later Blavatsky sought to bridge. The ancient Gnostics leave us with a haunting choice. If you are psychic, if you possess the latent capacity for awakening, you can either remain comfortably bound to the world of the hylic, or you can take the perilous journey toward becoming pneumatic. That journey is the journey of the soul, awakening, remembering, and ultimately returning to its true home. Fast forward nearly 2 millennia from the Gnostic sages, and we encounter one of the most controversial figures to bring this ancient theme into the modern spotlight: David Icke. To his critics, he is a conspiracy theorist of the most sensational kind. To his supporters, he is a whistleblower, revealing a hidden architecture of power. But regardless of opinion, one thing is certain: his core ideas echo the Gnostic and Blavatskyan warning that many who appear human are not fully conscious beings in the spiritual sense. Icke's thesis, laid out in works such as The Biggest Secret, takes the concept of the soulless to a new, audacious level. He claims that humanity is covertly manipulated by an interdimensional predator species, often described in his work as reptilian beings that can disguise themselves in human form. According to him, these entities feed not on our physical bodies, but on our energy, especially the chaotic, fearful, and divisive energy produced when humanity is in a state of conflict and ignorance. But here's the crucial connection to our theme. Icke asserts that these reptilian forces have over centuries ceded positions of global influence with humans who are either devoid of independent consciousness or whose souls have been compromised. In his framework, these soulless elites are perfectly obedient agents of a hidden agenda, advancing policies and cultural currents that keep the wider population spiritually asleep. The overlap with the Gnostics is unmistakable. In his writings and lectures, Icke often draws on ancient sources, identifying his reptilian controllers with the archons of Gnostic lore. Just as the archons were cosmic jailers maintaining the illusion of the demiurge's world, Icke's reptilians maintain a matrix-like simulation that keeps humanity unaware of its true nature. He describes this false reality as a kind of program, self-reinforcing, seductive, and nearly invisible to those inside it. And in a modern echo of the hylic psychic pneumatic division, Icke implies that the majority of humans live in a kind of programmed state, reacting, consuming, obeying, without ever realizing that their inner potential has been hijacked. The soulless elites serve as both enforcers and symbols of this condition. They are the public face of a deeper manipulation, delivering messages, laws, and trends that subtly shape the collective mind. Now, whether we take his reptilian narrative literally or as metaphor, the underlying principle aligns with what we've already explored: that there is a rare quality of awakened consciousness, and that much of the human landscape is populated by individuals, some ordinary, some powerful, who lack it, and perhaps more disturbing, those without it are more easily used by forces, visible or invisible, whose aims are not aligned with human freedom. In Icke's telling, this manipulation is not brute force oppression, but a psychological and energetic game. People are distracted with entertainment, divided by engineered conflicts, and saturated with fear-based messaging. In such a climate, even those with the potential for awakening may remain dormant, never questioning the nature of reality, never sensing the deeper truth of their existence. His work is often dismissed for its more extreme claims, but strip away the reptilian imagery, and what remains is eerily familiar. A vision of a world managed by consciousness-deficient agents operating under a program that resists and suppresses spiritual awakening. The Gnostics spoke of the archons weaving illusions to keep humans in ignorance. Blavatsky warned of human shells manipulated by unseen forces. Icke has simply updated the cast of characters and the methods for a modern audience. Mass media instead of temples, digital illusions instead of mythic veils, high-tech surveillance instead of imperial decrees. Whether literal or symbolic, his soulless elite serves as a potent image. The idea that the absence of a soul, whether through never having one or losing it, makes a person an ideal instrument for agendas that diminish the human spirit. It is a chilling reminder that the struggle for consciousness is not just internal, but also systemic. The structures around us may, by design or by inertia, reward the soulless and sideline the awakened. So when Icke points to a politician reading a prepared speech, a corporate magnate pushing shallow consumerism, or a celebrity selling a destructive lifestyle, he sees not just individuals making poor choices, but examples of a deeper phenomenon. People whose inner light has been extinguished or was never lit. In his narrative, these are not merely flawed humans. They are avatars of the program, fulfilling its directives without the interference of an awakened conscience. In this way, Icke's modern myth mirrors the ancient warnings in Blavatsky's esoteric vision. The names change, the imagery evolves, but the core remains. Not everyone is awake, and not everyone is even capable of awakening. And among the unawakened, some hold extraordinary power over the rest. If all of this talk of soulless beings still feels abstract, let's bring it down to the level of daily life. How might we recognize such individuals if they walk, talk, and function much like anyone else? If the Gnostics, Blavatsky, and modern theorists are correct, the difference is not in the outer shell, but in the inner spark or the absence of it. The first and most telling sign is mechanical behavior. Soulless individuals tend to live in fixed patterns, moving through routines as though pre-programmed. Their gestures, speech, and even their emotional responses feel rehearsed, as if drawn from a limited script. It's not that they are incapable of activity. It's that their activity lacks originality, spontaneity, and a depth of genuine self-reflection. Pay attention to the way they speak. Often their words are borrowed wholesale from media, social groups, or authority figures. They echo the same phrases, opinions, and emotional tones they've absorbed from outside, rarely showing signs of independent thought. It's as if they are reading from a script written by someone else, a script they may not even realize they are following. Interactions with such individuals can leave you with an odd feeling of hollowness. You might notice that the conversation remains on superficial topics, circling the same cultural touchpoints or trivial complaints. They may be capable of small talk, but the moment the discussion turns toward deep questions about purpose, morality, or the nature of reality, they deflect, change the subject, or recite well-worn cliches. This is not to say that quiet people or those uninterested in philosophy are necessarily soulless. The distinction lies in presence. A souled person, even in silence, carries a certain awareness, a quality of being there that you can feel. A soulless person, on the other hand, can be physically present yet strangely absent, like an actor on stage whose eyes betray no real engagement with the role. Blavatsky described this absence as the loss of manas, the higher mind that connects to buddhi, spiritual intuition. Without it, a person lives entirely in the realm of kama, the lower desires. They react to stimuli, chase pleasures, and avoid discomfort, but without any guiding principle beyond immediate gratification. Consider the coworker who measures their entire self-worth by office politics, promotions, and what others think of them, never pausing to ask what truly matters, or the neighbor who parrots the latest headlines as though they were gospel, never questioning the source or the underlying motives, or the public figure who can mimic empathy on camera, yet whose actions consistently reveal a calculated self-interest. Corrado Malanga, the modern consciousness researcher we'll explore later, offers an even sharper lens. He suggests that people with souls are inherently creative and naturally resistant to rigid hierarchies. They don't need rules to tell them how to act because they have an inner compass. Soulless individuals, by contrast, rely on structures and collective identities to define themselves. They seek belonging in tightly organized systems, whether corporate ladders, ideological movements, or rigid social cliques, because without them, they feel unmanned. This need for external definition can also make the soulless ideal hosts for parasitic influences, be they psychological manipulations, groupthink, or, in more esoteric interpretations, literal non-human entities. With no inner authority to resist, they become channels for whatever program they've been tuned to follow. Recognizing such patterns requires discernment. It's easy to misinterpret shyness, stress, or cultural differences as signs of emptiness, and that would be a mistake. What we're talking about here is not a passing mood or a personality trait. It is a consistent, pervasive absence of self-generated thought, depth, and moral autonomy. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is that the soulless can thrive in modern society. In fact, the very structures we live within often reward mechanical conformity over conscious originality. Our education systems prize memorization over critical thinking. Our workplaces value compliance over questioning. Our media celebrate spectacle over substance. In such an environment, the soulless don't just blend in, they often rise to the top, which raises a sobering question. If these signs are becoming more common, is it because more people are being born without souls, or because more people are losing the connection to the souls they have? Blavatsky leaned toward the latter, warning that spiritual decline in an age of materialism could dim the inner light of entire populations. So, as we move deeper into this exploration, keep your attention tuned. You may find that you've already encountered such individuals without naming what you sensed, that uncanny emptiness, that programmed predictability. It may not be your imagination. It may be a glimpse into one of the strangest and most unsettling possibilities in all of human thought. That not everyone who looks human is fully alive inside. In recent decades, one modern voice has offered a strikingly clear lens through which to examine the difference between those who have a soul and those who do not. Corrado Malanga, an Italian researcher with a background in chemistry and a deep interest in consciousness studies. Malanga is known for his unconventional explorations of paranormal phenomena, particularly the alleged interactions between humans and non-human intelligences. But his work extends far beyond UFO lore. At its core, Malanga's inquiry grapples with the same question that haunted the Gnostics and fascinated Blavatsky. What is the soul? And why does it seem absent in some people? Malanga's approach is methodical, yet metaphysical. Drawing from his research and reports from countless individuals, he proposes that the soul is not a vague abstraction, but a definable, energetic consciousness unit, something that has qualities, tendencies, and measurable effects on human behavior. And crucially, he draws a sharp behavioral contrast between those who possess such a soul and those who do not. According to Malanga, people with souls share several consistent traits. The first is a natural resistance to rigid rules and imposed hierarchies. This doesn't mean they are lawless or chaotic. Rather, they possess an inner moral compass that renders blind obedience unnecessary. They act ethically, not because they fear punishment, but because their inner awareness informs them of what is right. This independence often manifests as creativity. Souled individuals generate ideas, art, and solutions that arise from within rather than merely replicating what they have been taught. Such people, Malanga notes, are often described as free spirits. They may appear unconventional or nonconformist, but this is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is the natural outcome of following one's inner truth over external dictates. They tend to be curious, self-reflective, and willing to question deeply held beliefs, including their own. In their presence, one often feels a sense of vitality, as if they carry an invisible light that animates not only themselves, but also the conversations and relationships around them. By contrast, those without a soul, what Malanga might call empty biological containers, show a very different profile. They are highly dependent on external structures for identity and purpose. Instead of asking themselves, "What is true for me?" they ask, "What am I supposed to do? How should I appear? Where do I fit?" These individuals gravitate toward organized systems, whether corporate hierarchies, military orders, religious dogmas, or political movements, not out of conscious alignment with the mission, but because the structure itself provides the sense of self they lack internally. Soulless individuals, Malanga argues, are also far more likely to pursue power as an end in itself. Without the inner fulfillment that comes from soul-guided living, they seek stimulation and validation through control over others or accumulation of status symbols. They are often adept at navigating systems for personal gain, not necessarily through overt malice, but through a single-minded focus on advancement within the predefined rules of the game. This difference has profound implications. A souled person might leave a prestigious position if it conflicts with their inner sense of integrity. A soulless person, however, is unlikely to even perceive the moral conflict, so long as the role maintains or increases their access to power, approval, or material comfort. Malanga also touches on an esoteric but vital point. The soulless are prime candidates for occupation by external intelligences. In his research, this often refers to parasitic non-human entities, consciousness forms that can interface with the human mind. But even stripped of that paranormal element, the metaphor holds. Without the sovereignty provided by an awakened soul, a person is vulnerable to being inhabited by ideologies, movements, or even another person's will. They become vehicles for agendas they do not originate or fully understand. One of Malanga's more provocative observations is that many of history's ruling families and financial dynasties may fall into the soulless category. These lineages often demonstrate remarkable cunning, persistence, and an almost mechanical drive to preserve their influence, but very little evidence of self-awareness or spiritual development. Their goals, VDJ. Wealth, power, control, VDJ, are pursued as though they were ultimate ends with no consideration for deeper purpose. In Malanga's framework, this makes perfect sense. Without a soul, there is no higher calling to respond to. He contrasts this with the cyclical nature of soul-led life. For those with a soul, the arc of existence, VDJ, birth, growth, decay, death, VDJ, is not something to be feared or avoided, but embraced as the soul's method of learning and evolving. The soulless, on the other hand, often seek ways to bypass or deny this cycle, Some fantasize about technological immortality or pour resources into preserving their physical form far beyond its natural span. In doing so, they reveal a fundamental misunderstanding that true immortality resides not in the body, but in the eternal consciousness of the soul. This difference in worldview trickles down into everyday interactions. Souled people can stand alone when necessary because their identity is anchored in something internal. Soulless people need the group, the banner, the collective cause, because without it, they risk confronting the void within. The former may still participate in communities or institutions, but they do so consciously, with the ability to step away if the path no longer aligns with their truth. The latter cannot step away without losing themselves entirely, because the group is their self. Malanga's insight reframes the conversation we've been having. The question is not only who has a soul, but also what are the practical consequences of having or lacking one. In his view, the soulless are not simply missing out on some abstract spiritual experience. They are fundamentally limited in their capacity for independent thought, empathy, and moral courage. And those with souls carry the responsibility to cultivate them. Because in a world that rewards conformity, it is dangerously easy to let that inner spark go dormant. Blavatsky did not see the soulless as rare anomalies. She believed they were symptoms of a larger cycle, waves in the vast ocean of human history. In her view, humanity moves through great epochs of spiritual vitality and spiritual decay. And in the current age, she warned, we are in a period of decline. She often referenced the ancient Hindu concept of the yugas, cosmic ages that chart humanity's rise and fall. According to this model, we are living in the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age. It is an era in which materialism reigns, moral clarity dims, and the connection to higher truths grows faint. In such an age, the number of people disconnected from their soul does not merely increase, it becomes the dominant condition. This was not just philosophical pessimism. Blavatsky observed the patterns in her own time: a growing obsession with wealth and social climbing, a decline in sincere spiritual inquiry, and an eagerness to trade principle for convenience. She feared these trends would accelerate in future generations. And looking at the modern world, it's hard to ignore the parallels. Our cities pulse with endless consumption. Technology provides constant distraction. The news cycles in rhythms of outrage and fear. Social approval is sought through curated images and hollow metrics of popularity. In such an environment, self-reflection is inconvenient, and the inner voice is drowned out by the noise. The qualities that nourish the soul, VUDJ silence, contemplation, empathy, courage, VUDJ, are easily pushed aside. And so the soulless do not merely survive, they thrive. Our economic and political systems often reward compliance over conscience, speed over wisdom, spectacle over truth. Individuals who can mimic human feeling without the burden of moral depth can rise quickly in such a climate. They become the influencers, the executives, the decision makers. Their lack of inner compass makes them perfect instruments for a system that values predictability and profit above all else. For Blavatsky, this was the inevitable result of spiritual neglect on a civilizational scale. When the collective mind turns away from the sacred, the link between the human vessel and the divine spark weakens, and in time, more and more vessels move through the world empty. This is why her message remains urgent. She did not simply catalog the symptoms of decline. She issued a challenge. If the age breeds shells, then the responsibility falls to the individual to resist that tide, to consciously choose awakening in a world that encourages sleep. The question is not whether the shells are among us. They are. The question is whether we will allow the age to make us one of them. If the soulless are, as Blavatsky and others suggest, the product of spiritual neglect, then the next question is obvious. What forces are shaping them? Are they born without the spark? Or does something in the way our world is structured slowly sever that connection? To answer this, we need to look at the systems we live within, because even the most conscious among us are swimming in currents we rarely notice. Modern neuroscience has revealed a truth that both ancient mystics and contemporary philosophers would recognize. Most of our lives are run by unconscious programming. Studies by researchers like Benjamin Libet have shown that the brain initiates an action milliseconds before we become aware of deciding to act. Daniel Kahneman's work suggests that as much as 95% of our decisions are made automatically, guided by ingrained habits, emotional conditioning, and environmental cues rather than active reasoning. This is not inherently sinister. It's how the brain conserves energy. But it means that much of what we think of as our will is actually the echo of past influences. Those influences are not random. From the moment we are born, our environment is shaping the code we will run on. The first and most crucial stage of this programming happens in early childhood. Up to about age 7, our brains operate predominantly in a theta wave state, a receptive, almost hypnotic condition in which we absorb information without critical filtering. In this stage, we internalize the tone of our parents' voices, the emotional atmosphere of our home, the beliefs and fears expressed around us. We learn not only language and motor skills, but also the unwritten rules of belonging. What earns praise, what triggers disapproval, which parts of ourselves are welcome and which must be hidden. If these formative years are dominated by fear, control, or rigid conformity, we may grow into adults who instinctively submit to authority, avoid risk, and distrust our own perceptions. If they are dominated by shallow material values, we may chase status and possessions without ever questioning why. These patterns are not thought through, they are installed. And here is where the illusion of free will becomes dangerous. A person who believes they are acting independently when, in fact, they are executing inherited scripts will never see the need to question their own programming. In Gurdjieff's language, they are asleep, moving through life as a machine. And if, as Blavatsky warned, the soul's connection to the higher self requires conscious choice and self-remembering, then a life lived entirely in mechanical habit is a life in which that connection atrophies. Our social systems, intentionally or not, reinforce this state. Education in most of the world is not designed to awaken curiosity or teach the skill of self-inquiry. It is designed to produce compliant, predictable citizens and workers. Children sit in rows, follow schedules dictated by bells, memorize information for tests, and learn that obedience is rewarded while dissent is punished. The goal is not to cultivate unique perspectives, but to standardize outcomes. Mass media takes over where formal schooling leaves off. From television to social networks, our attention is drawn toward narratives crafted to maintain emotional arousal without genuine resolution. Fear cycles in the news, endless consumer temptations in advertising, outrage in political discourse. Each message leaves an imprint. Over time, these inputs create a consensus reality in which certain questions are never asked and certain assumptions are never challenged. Even entertainment plays a role. We may think of films, games, and online content as harmless leisure, but they also serve as delivery systems for archetypes, behaviors, and value systems. Repeated exposure to glamorized violence, shallow relationships, or conspicuous consumption subtly recalibrates our sense of what is normal and desirable. The cumulative effect is profound. We may believe we are making choices: what to buy, who to vote for, what to value. But these choices often fall within a narrow set of options presented to us by the very systems that benefit from our compliance. Like a fish that cannot see the water, we operate inside a web of conditioning so total that it becomes invisible. From the Gnostic perspective, this is the work of the archons, forces that maintain the prison of ignorance. From Blavatsky's angle, it is the involutionary tide that pulls us away from spiritual ascent. In contemporary terms, it is the self-perpetuating loop of social, economic, and cultural programming. The language changes, but the effect is the same. A world where living as an automaton is easy and living as a conscious soul is rare. This is why so many mystics, from ancient teachers to modern truth seekers, emphasize the need for deliberate inner work. Without it, the default state is to drift along the grooves carved into us by childhood and culture. The result, over years and decades, can be a life lived without ever truly awakening. A life where the soul, unengaged and unexpressed, gradually recedes until only the shell remains. In that sense, the soulless person may not have started life that way. They may have begun with the same potential for awakening as anyone else. But without moments of disruption, without the courage to question, without the discipline to act on what they discover, they become shaped entirely by external forces. And once the connection to the higher self is lost, returning to it is not impossible, but it is far more difficult. Understanding this should do more than disturb us. It should make us vigilant. The choice to remain conscious is not a one-time decision. It is a daily act of resistance against the inertia of programming. Each time we pause before reacting, each time we question a belief we inherited, each time we turn away from the noise to listen inward, we weaken the hold of the program. Because if we do not, we are not truly choosing our lives at all. We are simply living the choices that were made for us long before we knew we had a choice to make. And in the end, that is the surest path to becoming what Blavatsky called a human shell, alive in body but absent in spirit. If our choices are largely shaped by unconscious programming, then it follows that the systems surrounding us have immense influence over what kind of humans we become. And here lies a troubling truth. The structure of our society does not merely allow for the existence of human shells, it actively manufactures them. Consider education. In theory, it should be the great awakener, a process that nurtures curiosity, self-reflection, and the ability to think independently. In practice, for most, it functions as a system of conformity. Children are placed in rigid rows, trained to follow bells, to absorb and repeat approved information. Questions that challenge the framework are discouraged. Creativity is often treated as a distraction. The unspoken lesson is clear. Success means fitting into the mold, not transcending it. Next, media and entertainment. We imagine we're choosing what to consume, but the flow of images, stories, and must-see narratives is carefully curated. News cycles keep attention locked on fear and conflict, while advertising promises that meaning and fulfillment can be bought. Even art, once a vessel for the deepest truths, is often packaged for mass appeal, stripped of its capacity to awaken. In this constant stream of stimulation, there's no space for the stillness in which the soul might speak. Then there's politics and governance. Policies, institutions, and bureaucracies demand compliance far more than they invite participation. People are divided into opposing camps, each convinced they hold the truth. Each fed a steady diet of narratives that reinforce loyalty to the team rather than to reality itself. This division ensures that few ever look above the fray to ask whether the game itself is worth playing. In such a climate, those who act mechanically, who follow scripts without questioning, are rewarded. They are easier to manage, more predictable, more efficient for the system's purposes. Those who resist, who question, who insist on following their own inner compass are often sidelined, ridiculed, or crushed under the weight of rules and ridicule. It's here that Blavatsky's insight becomes sharper. The soulless are not just an unfortunate byproduct, they are useful. A world of shells is a world without resistance. It is a world in which human beings become interchangeable parts in an economic, political, and cultural machine. This machine does not need to be directed by a single conspirator. Its operation is systemic, sustained by countless small incentives and disincentives, all of which push people toward the same destination: comfort without awareness, activity without purpose, survival without soul. Recognizing this is not meant to inspire despair, but to make clear what we are up against. To keep your soul alive in such a system requires deliberate choice, daily vigilance, and the courage to live as something more than a well-oiled cog. Because if you do not choose that path for yourself, the system will choose for you, and it will choose the shell. If the system is designed to reward the shell and suppress the soul, then awakening becomes an act of quiet rebellion. But make no mistake, resisting the program is not without cost. The moment you begin to see the strings, you are no longer playing the role the system has assigned to you. And systems, by their nature, push back against those who refuse to follow their script. The first stage of awakening often feels like alienation. Friends may notice your changed perspective and label you paranoid or overthinking. Colleagues might find you difficult because you question procedures or refuse to cut ethical corners. Even family can grow uncomfortable when your values no longer mirror theirs. This is the social immune system at work, attempting to draw you back into conformity. But this discomfort is the first test. If you persist, something shifts. You begin to see patterns in events that others dismiss as coincidence. You notice how narratives are repeated across different media channels. You observe your own impulses and realize how many of them have been planted, not chosen. These realizations are both liberating and disorienting. Liberating because you finally recognize the bars of the cage. Disorienting because you now must decide how to live outside them. Living awake means accepting a certain level of solitude. You will walk paths others avoid. You will decline opportunities that violate your conscience, even if they promise security or status. You will learn to draw strength from within, rather than from the approval of the crowd. This is not an easy road, but it is the only one that keeps the soul intact. Resisting the program also requires discipline. It is not enough to see through the illusion once. The system works constantly to pull you back. It does this through comfort, offering entertainment, convenience, belonging to a group that thinks for you. These are temptations precisely because they appeal to our most basic human needs. The awakened person learns to meet those needs consciously, choosing meaningful rest over numbing distraction, genuine community over echo chambers, purpose over comfort. And here lies the paradox. Once you awaken, you cannot fully re-enter the dream. The illusions that once held power over you become transparent. Society's musts and shoulds lose their authority. You begin to live by your own inner law, a law aligned with truth, compassion, and clarity, rather than manipulation. This is why awakening is both feared and suppressed by the system. Not because it creates chaos, but because it creates individuals who cannot be controlled by fear, shame, or false promises. These individuals become living proof that another way of being is possible, and that is the most dangerous idea of all, to a machine built on conformity. In the end, resisting the program is less about fighting the outer world than it is about mastering your inner one. If you can keep your soul awake in a world that rewards sleep, you've already won the most important battle. If there is one truth that both ancient mystics and modern seekers agree on, it is this: awakening is never accidental. It is a deliberate, ongoing act of will. The system does not give you freedom. You must take it. The soul does not stay lit by itself. You must tend to it like a flame in the wind. The first step is self-observation. Watch your own thoughts and behaviors as if you were an impartial witness. Notice when you are acting on habit rather than choice. Ask yourself, is this reaction mine, or is it something I've been taught to perform? This simple act begins to pull you out of automatic living. Second, break your patterns. The mechanical mind thrives on routine because it keeps you asleep. Change something: your route to work, your daily schedule, the type of information you consume. Even small disruptions force your awareness to engage with the present moment. Third, question your beliefs, not to discard them recklessly, but to examine where they came from and whether they still serve you. Beliefs that cannot stand up to honest scrutiny are not yours. They are the program's. Finally, create spaces of silence and solitude. In a world engineered to keep you distracted, stillness becomes a revolutionary act. It is in silence that the soul's voice can be heard above the noise. These steps are not glamorous, nor are they easy, but they are the difference between being a passenger in your own life and being its pilot. Every act of awareness strengthens the bridge between your human self and the divine spark within you. The world may not thank you for awakening. It may even punish you, but you will have reclaimed something priceless: yourself. And in a time when so many drift through life as shells, that is nothing less than a miracle. We began with a question: is everyone you meet truly alive inside? Along this journey, we've heard the warnings of the Gnostics, the visions of Helena Blavatsky, the modern echoes from voices like David Icke, and the psychological insights of Corrado Malanga. Across centuries and cultures, the message has been remarkably consistent. The soul is not a universal given. Consciousness is rare, and in times of spiritual decline, those living without it may be the majority. But if there is one truth that cuts through all the mystery, it is this: awakening is a choice. You cannot change the cycles of history, the nature of the system, or the existence of the shells around you, but you can decide whether you will join them. This choice is made not once, but every day. Each time you observe yourself instead of running on autopilot, you are choosing. Each time you act from inner conviction rather than social pressure, you are choosing. Each time you create, question, or seek silence in a noisy world, you are choosing. The path is not easy. It will set you apart. It will strip away illusions you may have cherished, and it may even cost you the comfort of belonging to the crowd. But what you gain in return, the knowledge that you are living as a whole being with the bridge to your higher self intact, is beyond price. In the end, the real danger is not the existence of the soulless, but the risk of becoming one yourself through neglect. The system will always invite you to drift. It will offer safety in exchange for your awareness, comfort in exchange for your autonomy. The question is whether you will take that bargain or refuse it. So I leave you with this: protect your soul. Guard it against the dulling of habit and the seduction of ease. Feed it with truth, reflection, and courage. Because in a world where so many live as shells, the greatest revolution you can lead is to remain fully, fiercely alive.